We're speaking with lawmakers about their top priorities for the upcoming weeks, as well as the most pressing issues.
Representative Eugene Vindman of Virginia's 7th Congressional District is here with us this morning. Thanks for taking the time to come in person. We certainly appreciate it. So let's talk about some of your priorities. Certainly a lot to get to. But I know you're worried about opioid use, and especially one specifically called nitazene. This is a class of synthetic opioids that is stronger than fentanyl?
It is, and thanks for having me, Hillary and Corey. Nitazenes is an up-and-coming drug. It was actually developed in the 1950s, but it had no medicinal value because it was too strong. It's up to 40 times stronger than fentanyl.
Wow.
And so we visited the DEA lab that's located in my district on Quantico Marine Base, and we talked in detail about nitazenes. And this drug is so powerful that 2 grams, just a few, if you think about a packet of sugar, a few grains is sufficient to put people in overdose. And the typical remedy for that, naloxone, which all first responders carry, is not sufficient to treat that. That's how dangerous it is.
Wow. And how is this impacting the community?
So it's caused thousands of overdoses around the country in the DMV. It's an extremely dangerous drug, and it's cheap and easy to manufacture.
So the Nitazene Control Act has been introduced, and I want to read exactly what this act does, and we can put it up on the screen here. It classifies nitazenes as a Schedule I drug, prevents chemists from exploiting loopholes with minor chemical changes, lists known compounds of nitazenes, and provides research exemptions to support legitimate scientific and medical studies. One would think a dangerous drug such as this, you're going to get bipartisan support. Where are things standing now in terms of where this is at in the House?
That's exactly the case. So we found a bipartisan sponsor, and we've introduced the bill. I feel very good about the prospects for this bill. I've spoken to leadership on the Democratic side, and we've got bipartisan support. Look, this drug is so dangerous that, like I said, thousands of overdoses, and the current regime right now is whack-a-mole. So a chemist will change one little tiny molecule, and then the drug that they manufacture is no longer technically illegal. By classifying the entire drug, you basically prevent a chemist from making that minor change and give the law enforcement the opportunity to really attack the problem.
So there is bipartisanship on this issue. When it comes to a budget, not so much, Congressman. So people are wondering what's going to happen moving forward. Is there some sort of Democratic plan? What can you tell us?
Well, look, on that point, there's actually a special election in the DMV today. CD 11, the polls are open. They're open till 7 o'clock. The margins are so tight right now that that is a critical vote. And my friend James Walkinshaw, who's the successor to Jerry Connolly, is a good man, a great man for the job. And so because the margins are so tight, I'm also very curious to see what happens with the budget. Obviously, the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so they can pass a budget on their own. If they want Democrats' help because they can't get themselves in line, then they're going to have to come to the table with some priorities.
One of the key issues in that race in Virginia's 11th district is the DOJ cuts, which have disproportionately fallen on people in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. What are you seeing among your constituents who may have been axed from their federal government job?
Major problem. I think it's going to be devastating to the economy in the long run. We started out the year with 55,000 federal civil servants in my district. That would have put us in top 2 or 3 in the country as far as federal civil servants. That number is thousands lower. And so I think it's devastating to the economy. I've spoken to realtors, I've spoken to food kitchens, and the demand from food kitchens is skyrocketing. Housing prices are still high, but a lot more housing on the market. So it's going to be a major topic. And I just look at the gubernatorial race and the fact that Abigail Spanberger is spending a lot of money talking about this issue and how her opponent, in that sort of famous CNN clip, says this is not a serious issue. In the DMV, this is an absolutely critical issue, and anybody that doesn't recognize that has just got their head in the sand.
Well, part of that issue is the USDA, you sit on that committee, all of these jobs that are going to be moved out of D.C. to other places across the country. And the Secretary Rollins says this is a cost-cutting measure, a decision to move out more than half of the D.C. workforce to other cities. What do you think that will glean here? How do you see that playing out? And do you think it will actually do what she suggests it will?
Well, frankly, I have very little confidence in Secretary Rollins and the entire cabinet. Secretary Rollins testified before my committee, and I asked her a simple question. They wanted to cut SNAP benefits. They cut $300 billion in SNAP benefits. I asked her, what is the daily SNAP benefit? And she couldn't answer that question. It's $6.20. Apparently, that's too high for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so when she talks about moving USDA and personnel out of USDA, out of the DMV, out of Virginia, I wonder to myself, agriculture is still the #1 industry in Virginia. People don't recognize that necessarily in Northern Virginia, but it is. And so we have a need for it here in Virginia, here on the Eastern Seaboard, and it doesn't make a great deal of sense to move it.
How is the tariff uncertainty, when you're talking about agriculture, especially in the Commonwealth, how is the tariff uncertainty playing out on the ground for food producers, for farmers in Virginia?
Absolutely. So I did a tour of farm country in the 7th Congressional District, and farmers are very nervous. It depends on the commodity. Beef prices are high. If you enjoy a burger, you know that. But, wheat prices, grains are low. Soybeans, a major market for that has been China. That's drying up. So we're going to figure out in the next few weeks exactly what effect that has in the market. But farmers in Virginia and the 7th Congressional District are very nervous, and around the country. We see news stories about that from around the country.
So I want to ask you about Ukraine. You were born in Ukraine. It was under the old Soviet Union, right? So you have an innate understanding of the country's very complicated relationship, Ukraine and Russia. Europe is worried about Russia. It's still staunchly in Ukraine's corner. Where do you see America in this battle, and what do you think this country needs to do for Ukraine and possibly U.S. national security?
Well, unfortunately, what I see from this administration is a great deal of weakness. The president for months now has been talking about a 2-week deadline, that there's going to be sanctions in 2 weeks. But every time there's a decision point, he moves to placate Vladimir Putin. That is weakness. An FSB, KGB officer does not respond well to weakness. And we see attacks on Ukraine. I mean, the largest attack, aerial attack of the war just occurred over the weekend. They hit one of the main government buildings. The Europeans are in support. Congress is overwhelmingly in support. We've seen that in votes. But this administration, for some reason, doesn't understand the basic notion that you can't be weak responding to autocrats. And so, as a 25-year Army vet, as a veteran of the National Security Council at the White House during the first Trump administration, it seems like this is a very obvious issue. But the cabinet, the people that the president has surrounded himself with, are just demonstrating weakness, and it's a major problem.
Let me just follow. How do you see this ending? Do you see it in your mind if you play it forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this will ultimately end in a negotiation, which is just about how every war ends. Not 100% of the time, but most of the time. So there are very few complete victories. But that only happens when the Russians feel like they need to be at the bargaining table. And right now, if we think about, a football field, we're looking down, to the end zone on the other end. The president has gone all the way. He's given away everything up until the red zone, the Ukrainian red zone, with no access to NATO for Ukraine, territorial concessions. All of this, a visit by somebody that's got an arrest warrant that would be arrested in 123 countries. To the United States without getting anything in return. I think that is weak.
Real quick, what would you tell President Zelensky as he is potentially at the negotiating table across from Vladimir Putin, looking at the real prospect of ultimately having to give up some of Ukrainian land?
Yeah, so I still have colleagues that are working on the war crimes investigation mission there. And hours after this terrible attack in downtown Kiev, their Ukrainian people were out on the street, and they were out celebrating. I don't know what it was, but I saw a video that he took himself of the celebration. And so that resilience, that strength, that they're demonstrating on behalf of their own sovereignty, their own freedom, but also on behalf of Europeans and Western values, American values. They need to maintain that, and they need to persevere.
Congressman Eugene Vindman, thank you so much for being with us, a proud representative of Virginia's 7th District.
Thank you.
Let's